So my name is Chris Sistrunk, Principal Consultant at Mandiant. I'm glad to be here at S4 again, giving a talk about detection and response for control systems. Let's boil this down. I'm going to dovetail just a little bit on Rob's talk about threats. And they aren't going to go away, and what do we do about it? And then boil it down into detection and response. What's the why, what, when, where to deal with detection of threats? And how do we do with our incident response plan, when to act and who to call? These are going to be presented in two slices, but think about this as they should be married together. Detection and response gives more ideas on how to do detection better, which helps you do response better. So think about it that way. Evolving threat landscape, remember, it's a who, not a what. A human is at the keyboard. Yes, we have Conficker and automated malware, but we're going to really focus on that in this talk. There's a lot of information out there on how to deal with commodity issues involving patching and other risk management, but I want to focus on the who. They're highly tailoring attacks towards your environment, and now that's involving control systems. They're professional, organized, and well-funded. For instance, the Russian GRU has a group specifically going after different things, and even the FBI has indicted individuals from that group with their pictures and said, "We're calling you out. We know that you're doing this." They're escalating tactics. They're focusing on their objective because that's been given to them by their upper management or their governments. And if you kick them out, they will return. They have specific objectives, and their goal is long-term occupation or getting upper hand in something, stealing information, destroying things. So as an example of Trisis or Triton, we saw that attacker come back or try to come back after we kicked them out. And they're going to keep trying to come back and come back. So think about it as a who, not a what. Education is key. I know that there's people here that are on the IT side, and I know that there's people here on the control systems or engineering side. So when you take an IT person to someplace like a substation, they may not be familiar with what's going on. What are these boxes about? Keep your hands in your pockets. Likewise, we have engineers. I can remote into this system with my iPad, and they don't know the basics of security, but they know about the process. Have discussions between you both from the IT side and engineering side, like Rob said, and I've said many times. Take a box of donuts or a box of kolaches if you're in Texas, down to the control room, down to the engineers. Really get inside their head. Ask them what their pain points are, and they can tell you, and then you can have some cross education. And this is a key point I want to make here. Knowledge is the most powerful tool to defend your control systems. If you remember nothing of my talk, remember this. How does my system work? Not only how does the processes work, how is it engineered, but also how is the security of that system work? So how is my network security monitoring for that control system work? It has to be engineered just like the control system itself. What are the threats and risks to my control system, going from is it vulnerable and unpatched and connected to the internet to I've got APT 4000 attacking me and I need to do something about it. Do I have total visibility? A lot of people say, oh, in IT we have monitoring. Well, a lot of places they do, but it's only on the IT side of the network. But where they make their hammers and gadgets and widgets and you're selling cars or you're making oil and gas, they don't have visibility into that side of the network. They only have visibility on the IT side. So we need to get complete visibility here. Also, when something bad happens, are you just waving your hands in your response, or do you actually have a plan, an incident response plan, and do you practice it, expecting the worst? So knowledge is so important. This is an overview of the incident response process, and like I said, detection is highly involved with incident response. This is from the NIST document, and I'll provide a link to that at the end, and so you don't have to memorize this, but you want to have an environment that makes it easier to do response. So preparing the environment for response is something to think about. You have to do that before you can do any detection. If I don't have any logs, well, I need to prepare my environment by turning on the logs that are there or collecting them. Also, that leads into hunting and detection and hunting and detection and hunting, writing rules, tuning the alerts, things like that. In the end of the incident response, you have remediation where you kick the bad guys out. And hopefully your detection and hunting has provided enough information where you've gotten enough information where they don't come back. So you've locked them out. Winter is coming, right? In DC, winter's here, right? They had how many inches of snow yesterday? Things to think about before you have an incident. Harden your network. Make it investigation friendly. So how do we do that? This is just, I'm not going to read through this, but you want to harden your network. So harden your privilege management. Some of the things I have highlighted are specific to control systems. Of course, you want to take administrator privileges away, but like say you have Active Directory. You don't want one Active Directory for IT and control systems. You want to have a separate system. Or using firewalls to segment the network in a DMZ, or eliminating dual home devices. So like in the case of some attacks that we've seen, they get into the control system through the dual home device. Investigative, make it where you can get logs on your host base. Network traffic, you're looking at in logging. Control systems have Windows logs and syslog that you can just turn on and start collecting. Again, hardening, eliminate external connectivity, block access to the internet if you can. Some things you have to send data back to your vendor or to third parties, so be careful about that. Remote access, limit access and control and monitor. So some of these things helps prepare your network to do detection and response. In the detection phase of any part of your control system, security, policy, or of your organization, if you don't have anything, I can show you how you can use existing tools and people. What can we do right now about all these threats that Rob told us about? We've got all these groups that are making malware and targeting our systems. Well, you can't just monitor everything. You got to start somewhere, and you may not have a budget for it. You may not. Some places they won't do anything until the attack happens, and then the checkbook opens, and we can start doing detection. But starting small. You start crawling before you're running, before you fly. Right? Detection is a continuum. You can start with a small amount of detection. Get that fine-tuned and get it reliable and actionable, and then grow that as you need visibility. If you have 200 plants around the world, you don't want to just start monitoring every single one of them. You're going to have an overwhelming amount of alerts coming in. Start with your most critical pieces. If you've done any risk analysis, and I know we got a future talk about risk, you want to boil it down to what's the most important piece. If this part of our network or of our business goes down, how much money is that going to affect our business? How much, risk to our business is that affect? And that will tell you what your critical assets are. You want to start with monitoring those. Don't overwhelm yourself, and then measure your success. So if you've put in some visibility and say, okay, we have a right amount of people to manage this and fine tune it, but we have a need to do more, or if it's absolutely worthless what we did, this project we put in, it's not worth anything to us. We've got to do something different. Measure what you manage, and manage what you measure, right? So to boil this down, and there's several different buckets of, you say, what is detection? What's the types? So there's network-based and endpoint-based. Network, you might have heard about an IDS or a firewall. It looks for something and detects it on the network looking at the traffic. On the endpoint, you have antivirus or like a security agent. Thus, we can they're commonly used on the IT, but we're starting to see them in control systems because they understand control system protocols. And in some places, we see agents being able to be installed in a control system network, especially if it's a newer one that has virtual machines based. And a lot of vendors are starting to think about that. In the older systems, you don't want to put an agent on an older HMI, right? It could affect the operations of it. There's two terms in the book, applied network security monitoring and the practice of network security monitoring, that you'll see at the end of my talk. I have those books references, but there's a talk of continuous monitoring, and it's focused on finding vulnerability or risk. We have so many Windows XP machines out there. We need to patch those. Have we done scans on them to see if they're patched to the latest update, right? It's not focused on finding threats or attackers, and that's network security monitoring. Network security monitoring is going above and beyond continuous monitoring and looking for those attack groups that may be in your network. Also, there's signature-based detection, which is based on indicators of compromise. So you have indicators of compromise that Rob talked about, and giving that information from your threat groups. How do you ingest that and put that into your detection? Something that we've seen before, a malware that's been seen, that's how antivirus works, right? We've seen this malware before, we can write an indicator of a compromise, and that's how it detects it. Or writing, say, a snort network detection rule, or any other for your security monitoring. You can write rules based on something that you already know. Anomaly-based is, and we're starting to see this in the control system network security monitoring market with all these different vendors and tools here that's going to be here this week. They learn the network, and after a certain time period, they say, okay, we think we learned the network. Now, anything that's outside of that normal, we'll alert on it. So it might be a new IP address, a new protocol, a new port, whatever. It doesn't care. It just says, I've never seen this before, I'm going to alert on it. The last base is based on what Rob talked about too, like cyber kill chain, the ICS threats. If you walk down, each group has their own tactics, techniques, and procedures that differentiate themselves from other attack groups. So we know that this group may use remote desktop and install this backdoor, and then they'll install this command and control infrastructure. Or they may use this family of malware that's modified, or they might use Metasploit or PowerShell or something like that. Behavior-based is, that's like when you're running and you can't walk or crawl and do behavior-based if you don't have any visibility. You have to have more than just jumping right into behavior-based stuff. Where will we detect, Chris? How do we know that these threats, where do we look? You can't see where you're not looking, basically. If you don't have any visibility in your network, you're not going to see any attacks, right? We didn't see any attacks today, but did you look? Well, no. Right? So think about these critical assets I talked about earlier. Are they down in the control part? Are they in the ICS layer? Do you have any visibility there? Think about this little network diagram here. And your network probably looks completely different, but this is just an example to talk through. We want to be able to monitor maybe third-party connections, or monitor control system traffic that's going to the DMZ, which goes to enterprise. And any communication from one critical ICS, like a SCADA master, to another, something like that. The most important thing here is people. You have to have someone that's on the opposite keyboard than the attacker. Remember, it's a who, not a what, is attacking you. You need to have a who defending you as well. So this is a picture of Mike Asante. I love this man. He's not here, but we love him. And he's an excellent hunter. And this is a picture of him. When you have a hunter, you have someone that has an inquisitive mind. You're thinking about these things. Okay, what can an attacker do in my network? What can a user do in my network? What did the vendor allow to happen in my network? You're thinking about all these things. They have that knowledge. Also, you have collection tools, network security monitoring collection tools. So in this case, he's got his binoculars so he can look. That's the visibility into the control system network. Not like the SCADA or the control system itself, but we're talking about cybersecurity visibility. You also have hunting tools. So he has his rifle there. And this is things like looking at logs and looking at ways that you can write alerts and write new detection rules, and then making changes to your network like firewall rules and being able to take control of the security of that network. And then also too, the last thing is protection. An attacker, if they had access to what Mike would know as your security analyst, if an attacker knew what this analyst knew, then they could probably avoid you, right? So you want to make sure that you protect your security system too, and not put any default passwords to your SIM or anything like that, right? So we want to make sure you protect that. I'm going to take that hunting reference and apply that to network security monitoring collection, and this is part of detection phase still. So you have enterprise collectors. Oh, it looks like my diagram got blown up, but that's okay. If I need, I'll send out this presentation online later, and for some reason the graphic blew up. But the red one goes on your enterprise stuff in your DMZ. So might be your historian or your web interface to your control system viewing, like read-only. You could put enterprise-based, antivirus and agents. Logs or agents goes down in the control system. You might be able to turn on Windows log, syslog, things like that. You may or may not be able to put an agent down there. In an electric sector, yeah, we'll put antivirus in that layer for sure. The orange one are network sensors, so you want to put network detection like IDS or full packet capture along the edge, and you can do that anywhere in the network. And then the last one is logs only. That's down in the PLC layer. You might be able to collect just a few things from the logs that's in those PLCs, but you won't be able to install an antivirus on them because operating systems are proprietary and embedded, so they don't have that type of functionality, right? So let's pivot to hunting. I don't know if anyone in here is a hunter, but let's say if you're a hunter, you want to find out what kind of animals are on your property. Well, let's look in the mud. Let's look at the traffic, right? Oh, we see some deer tracks. Oh, we see some raccoon tracks. We see some squirrel tracks. We see some human tracks, right? How do we look at them? We install a trail camera. Same thing with visibility in your control system network for security. You want to make sure you have those network IDS and maybe antivirus logs coming in, getting that visibility. What are we looking for, Chris? Like again, the baseline. What does your normal traffic on your network look like? Have you actually looked at the packet capture of your network? What's the exception to the baseline? So SCADA Master A talks to Substation B, but it never talks to Substation C because that's another system. If you see A trying to talk to C, that's probably something you should investigate. What is our normal talkers? What's our top talkers? Who's the ones who talk to each other the most on the network? It might be a SCADA historian replicating to the DMZ and up to enterprise. And that's a lot of traffic. And you see that as your top megabyte per second bandwidth usage, for instance, or other things like that. Unexpected connectivity to the internet. You want to look for known malicious IPs from indicators of compromise reports that come from threat intel reports. Logins using default accounts is another example. So in older SCADA systems, you can't change hard-coded password. But you can at least monitor it and see if they're using it properly. And again, you can look for unexpected firmware updates. Just another example here. The next phase after that is getting into that detection and hunting loop in the incident response picture I showed earlier. This is where your analyst looks at detection and anomalies and alerts and then escalates it to an incident response. So you're looking at IDS alerts, firmware updates, other commands, log in with those credentials from strange places perhaps, high CPU or network bandwidth. For instance, if a substation has a door alarm, but the door alarm goes off, but no one's actually in that substation. You called down to that substation, no one's there. That should be like your linemen are not there, or your substation crew's not there. That would show that someone could be broken in, or devices going online and offline, are behaving strangely. So these are questions. What do we do about that? Well, we found a wolf print in the sand or in the mud, right? That shows we have something that could be a threat. Or we look at our camera, we see a hog trying to eat the stuff that we're having for the animals that we want to harvest, right? This hog is damaging our equipment. So we detected an anomaly here. Well, how do we go into the analysis phase? We've escalated it to an incident response, and they're taking that anomaly and trying to find the evil or ways to do evil, looking for application exploitation, third-party connections like strange ICCP, to vendors or other parties if you're in the electric sector. ICS-specific communication protocol attacks, saying someone's fuzzing Modbus. I've seen this in a client. They had a public-facing Modbus service going, and it was being attacked with Modbus fuzzing. Nothing happened, but we saw the traffic that it was definitely malformed. Remote access exploitation, USB-delivered malware. How do we find this evil? How do we see this attacks happening? So here's another example. Hunting. We see a little bunny rabbit tracks. He's hopping along. Boom. There's the attack. It's an owl, right? And the bunny rabbit tracks don't go after that, right? And we know why, because we saw a picture of the owl flying away with that rabbit. But also, if you look in your network, you may see things you never saw before, like squirrels attacking deer. Right? But if you don't look in your network traffic, you don't see this stuff. Managing the detection system has to be tuned just like your alarms have to be tuned for your control system process. If any of you are familiar with ISA, there's even a group that does alarm management for process alarms and SCADA alarms, ISA 18.2. And if an operator gets too many alarms, they're going to ignore it, or they're going to not be happy with you. I did this for the power company that I used to work at, and if they got a nuisance alarm, they would just silence it, and it's no good to them. It's the same kind of thing. Now the end result, there could be something physically go wrong, right? You could have your process blow up, or something like that. I don't know. But when you're tuning control system network security monitoring alerts, we want to make sure we're not overwhelmed. And that's what this picture's. If you turn on Modbus alerts in Bro, it's now been called Zeek. I don't know if you know that. Zeek, if you turn on Zeek Modbus alerts, it gives you every function code. You don't want that. It's just overwhelming you with too many alarms in your SIM. So, we don't want to know every function code in Modbus because that's good stuff. We want to find out the bad stuff or the anomalous stuff. So we have to tune that alerts back. We have to turn off these normal alerts. You have to attach meaning to each alert and map that alert to your response plan, because that's important. What do I do when this alert comes in? If you have a flood of alerts, we've seen this happen in real-world attacks, where they had too many alarms and an alert's coming from their security system, and they missed the actual attacker coming in. because there's so many other alerts. It got lost in the noise. So if you have too many alerts, it's no use to you, just like an operator silencing a nuisance alarm. Also, too, you want to try to automate your workflow as well to help your analysts. If it's repeatable, something in your incident response or your normal analyst workflow at your SOC, make their life easier by automation. So some things you can automate in doing a response. On the IT side, say, oh, we got this commodity malware, reimage the machine. Okay, great. And there's tools to automate that stuff. Think of ways to automate writing of alerts, deploying new firewall rules, things like that. Now let's segue into response. Writing an incident response plan, sticking to it, and a lot of times you have to involve your vendor. So what's an IRP and why do we need one, Chris? We want to make sure it establishes a high level of governance from your company. And you may already have an IRP for your IT network. And some of you here may be in charge of that. It aligns your business policies and responsibilities, but we want to make sure that includes the control system. And it defines your roles and responsibilities, things like that. Common definitions so everyone understands terminology and meaning. So when you say an engineer, well, do you mean network engineer or an electrical engineer? An engineer will understand root cause analysis, but they may not understand digital forensics and incident response. Telemetry is another one. I had a friend of mine who's in the SOC. He said, tell me about the telemetry. If you say telemetry to a SCADA engineer, they're going to go, what are you talking about? That's what SCADA is. It's telemetry. You talk about NASA. Well, the telemetry of this rocket is, whatever meters downrange, right? No, they're talking about network security monitoring telemetry, not SCADA telemetry. So you have to define these terms and understand the language that the engineers and technicians and your control system uses versus the terms that are used in the IT or control system security network monitoring language. You want to make one plan that's mapped to IT and OT or ICS. Why? Because you can coordinate response. A lot of times an ICS incident or an intrusion has to go through something IT first before it gets to the control system. Whether they're hacking into the enterprise network and then pivoting down to the control system or coming in through a laptop that's IT based, then pivoting to the control system. You want to be able to, say, leverage those teams across your organization because their business risk and the drivers are shared, and the cybersecurity and operational expertise are found in different places. I can't tell you how many times I've been at a client where we're doing a control system engagement, and it's the first time that the IT security team has ever talked to engineering at all. Sometimes that's the first time we've gotten them in the room together. So this is important. So incident response process, see evil, find evil. You're putting out fires out sometimes, or your first thing you want to do is assess the situation, right? It's like triage. Define objectives. Okay, what do we do to get the control system back online? Collect evidence to show where the attacker's been and what they've been doing. Perform analysis. What did they cause harm, or what did they do? What did they exfiltrate? Communicate the incident to management, and that's going to be the same for any IT incident response as well. Develop a remediation plan, which is going to be the same, except for in control systems, you can't just go reimage machines. And then document your findings. To have a report that's repeatable, you can say, hey, we documented everything that we did here, and because the lawyers are going to ask for that, right? So let's talk about the difference between ICS incident response and IT response. So assess the situation. How is the ICS affected? It's similar. You're you're getting a call. Oh man, something's down. We got an incident here. What do we do? Assess the situation. It's going to be the same, whether it happens on IT network or control system network. Define the objectives. Well, let's get this back to normal. The thing about control systems, they have physical processes, and that's a different key there. You might have some other things that are important too on IT networks, like stock market. If it goes down, you got to scramble to get that thing back up, right? But in this space, we're dealing with physical processes of oil and gas and manufacturing, mining, transportation, right? Collect evidence. Well, we don't have the tools that understand these proprietary operating systems and control system protocols, right? So we have to collect these things manually. Performing analysis. Well, to verify the anomalies or to verify this attack or intrusion, we don't have any ICS-specific DFIR tools. You can't just say use volatility or redline or a plethora of other tools that's out there on a control system, because it won't work. It will work for part of it, but if there's an ICS component like proprietary protocols and things like that, operating systems won't work. Communicate's similar, reporting that status management. They're asking every second. A board is really worried about their system, right? Communication's same. Remediation plan, when to regain control of the control system network. Some of these devices have constraints, like you can't go just re-image a PLC. You might have to grab a spare. There's some constraints. You might be able to. You might have to schedule an outage to make this change happen. You can't just yank processes up and down like you can on IT. And then document findings is similar. Write a report exactly what happened. So, like I said, lawyers. Assess the situation. So we're at this step. Some anomaly has occurred. We want to investigate it. Do the triage. Collect the initial facts. You're the first responder, right, in your network. No matter who they call, something's wrong. Well, what do we know? Is it a known good? So here's an example of a known good. Oh, well, we see... this is Modbus. We saw it in Wireshark, okay? Well, it's on the business network. That's weird. But it's something known. We know what it is. We have a parser for it, for instance. For some reason, this graphic shows it out of whack. So is it known bad? Is it known bad? Well, there's alert for configure in antivirus. Well, we know that's bad. And then RTU configuration that had a mistypo, a typographical error on the baud rate. It's not working because someone typed in 2600 baud instead of 2400. Okay. And the last one is unknown. Do we Google it? I mean, that's what I would do, right? You don't know? Responder.py, what is that? Uh-oh. After we do the initial triage, we move into assess the situation. Do we need to escalate this to a security incident? Who do we call and when? Engineers are going to be involved in your control system, but you also will have to involve public relations, the safety department. You may have to involve fire and other safety services, legal department, obviously, human resources. But I highlight vendors because in many places and a lot of customers that we've been to, they can't do anything out of the side of the ordinary because it's still under warranty. And so the vendor has rights over that system. They can't make any changes until the vendor says so. Or they may have a contract that says so. Oh, we've hired them out to do our control system management and configuration for 5 years. So you have to involve the vendor. You may not have no choice but to call them first. And they may or may not have a computer incident response team, a CERT. So you have, if they don't have a CERT, you have to involve them in yours or whatever that looks like, right? Another, assessing the situation, you may have to call in your incident response team. You might have an incident response retainer, for instance. having an NDA in advance say, hey, we need so-and-so here, boots on the ground. Or you may have to call your government, depending on where you live. I know some people are not from the United States that's here. So in the United States, you may have to call EISAC or ICS CERT. You may choose not to. You may have to call your government to help out, depending on that. So think about that as we do. You don't want our disaster recovery plan to look like, help! You need to have a good plan, right? Defining the objectives is important to put in your incident response plan. So having that course of action, not just in your head, have it written down in plan. Safety is usually number one, right? Availability is usually number two. There's no best way to do it. Every control system is different. So you work with your experts and your subject matter experts on what's the best process to do this, to restore it after an event or an incident. Inside your incident response plan, you should have some example playbooks. Just like I was watching the Saints game last night. I was really glad that they won. I've been a lifelong Saints fan, even when they were the Aints. But, Coach Sean Payton, he has that playbook, right? It's huge, right? And he said, okay, I got a run play. I got a pass play. I've got defensive plays at special teams. Got to have the same thing for what happens on a control system network, not just for. And you already have a disaster recovery plan. The thing is caught on fire. How do we put it out? You've already got that. A hurricane's coming. Oh, we already know how to do hurricane response. Do the same thing for, like say, commodity malware. Have a playbook ready to go. Config or Ramnet, Palevo, whatever. Commodity malwares happen. Have a playbook to deal with that on your control system. Have a playbook for if your credentials are compromised. How do you reset the passwords? On these systems, we can't reset the passwords. We have to do something else. Think about that before it actually happens. And then, for instance, have a playbook for destructive attack, like kill disk, overwriting firmware, right? Or ransomware. Have these playbooks ready to go so you can call them up and win the game, right? Stop the bleeding. That might take precedent. So wiper malware is wiping your control systems. You might want to unplug the network and isolate it first to stop the bleeding. Instead of playing whack-a-mole, resetting accounts, like what happened in the Ukraine, the first Ukraine attack, they were playing whack-a-mole with resetting the accounts, and the attacker had all the accounts. They should have just yanked the VPN access, and that would have killed everything. Having that ability to be able to pivot like that is important. Collecting evidence. The next phase of incident response. We don't have any ICS-specific DFIR tools, but we can use the software that usually comes with these PLCs and HMIs. We can use Terminal, FTP, web browser, PLC software. So here's some examples. You have to think outside of the box. And it's probably something that your engineers or technicians do on a daily basis. During incident, what to collect? You need to collect physical data and digital data. Down from the exact location of where it is, the serial number, part number, firmware number, power consumption, temperature. That's a good one. Mark Fabro gave a talk at Forsix, now it's called CS3 Stockholm, and the video's on YouTube. They were looking with a FLIR camera around this power plant, and they saw an HMI, and then they saw another HMI that was identical, but it was a lot hotter, and you could see the difference. Found out that HMI had a Trojan on it, and it was just causing the CPU to be hotter. Evidence of tampering. If you don't have a good asset database of all your assets, you're going to have to make one when you have an incident to find out exactly what's going on where. Digital data, time, configuration, last known good configuration out of your repository or an email or a disk on top of the PLC, right? You might have to do that. What the operating system is, CPU usage, memory usage, active ports, logs, even memory. And that's kind of cut off on this presentation for some reason. Sorry about that. whenever we publish these, you'll be able to see all of this, so don't worry about that. But in some devices, the vendor is able to extract the memory for troubleshooting, and they'll use it at the factory. And you can dump the memory out of a lot of PLCs that way because they have that tool built into the software. So you may have to do that like in Trisus or Triton. It was a memory. It attached stuff in memory, and we were able to dump the memory out of that unit because they had tools from the factory. Read the manual. A lot of times in the manual, it has troubleshooting tips and who to call and things like that. Think about that. Best practices for collection is prepare in advance, have a collection plan. Your technicians do this on a daily basis. Make their jobs easier and write it down and put it in the playbooks and put it in your incident response plan. Make a list. Also, document exactly what you do when you do it. Don't just wing it, right? You want to have a good plan, have it written down, and say, okay, here we go. This is what we follow. Don't make any changes to the PLC. Don't want to erase anything that could be forensic evidence, right? Treat the evidence carefully. Don't make any changes to it, and assume the attacker knows it. Assume the attacker also has access to your PLC or HMI, and assume that those credentials are compromised. You actually may have to use back channels and not use your corporate email, right? You may have to use out-of-band communications to make sure that this data is preserved and the attackers don't know what you're doing. Have you tried to turn the PLC off and on again? Caution you on doing that because you may destroy the evidence that's in memory or in the configuration. So you want to be able to preserve that. Just think about that. I guess if you are the plant manager and you have to make a call because at some point you just got to get the system back up, and you have to make, especially if it's a life or death situation, you may have to reboot that PLC or change it out or something because you may have to make that call. But in general, we say don't reboot the PLC because you want to preserve what's on there. Performing the analysis, there's a scale of time to slower. The CEO wants to know who did it. Attribution, right? Let's show you how long this takes to do stuff. First responders are going to get there and look at the user event logs. And they're going to look at the configuration and the firmware and running configuration. Is the ladder logic good? They're going to have to do the analysis of that. They're going to have to see if the communications are normal or external sources of evidence like a firewall. Do we prefer the firewall logs over a compromised PLC logs? We may not be able to trust those. As we do this, the first responder, the time gets longer and longer to do the analysis. So if you have to analyze embedded operating system files, like what happened with Stuxnet, they didn't know what happened for years later. It took years of analysis to figure out exactly what happened because they had to analyze embedded operating system files, the network traffic, and the files on the PLCs and HMIs, right? And if you have to look in volatile memory, how many people here know the memory for, say, VxWorks? I don't. And they're hard pressed to find those experts. You have to go at the vendor or at Wind River Systems to find those kind of people. And so it takes a long time to do this analysis to put the picture back together what happened. The last stages of the IR process, again, communication, that's going to be the same. Remediation plan is a little bit different, right? We can't just reimage the machine or change passwords. But we want to do it in what we call the strike zone. If we kick the attacker out too early, we won't know enough about them to make better changes to our network or write firewall rules. Or if we wait too late, they're going to blow up our system or steal all our data, all that other FUD talk, right? They're going to complete their mission before we get a chance to kick them out. And so we want to wait for the right time to do that. And then lastly, document findings, right? Because all the way from our technical people all the way up to the C-level are going to want to know what happened, especially legal. Measure detection and response capabilities. Where are you now, and where do you want to be? What's the gaps in capabilities, training, tools, processes, and what's our roadmap of getting there? Are we initial or ad hoc all the way up to manage? We're actively managing and tuning our system, right? All right, this is the end of the talk, and we're going to get into some references. I heard you like references, so you can reference these references which have more references, right? So, detection resources. Practice of Network Security Monitoring, Richard Balick. Excellent book. Applied Network Security Monitoring by Chris Sanders and Jason Smith. 2 NIST standards on that I have referenced here. One on industrial control system security that everybody should know or be familiar with. And Jason's going to be talking about standards later. And that standard references a lot more standards. It's a great reference, and we use it a lot. But there's also one from NIST that talks about intrusion detection and prevention systems. I've got a blog on network security monitoring. I wrote a blog on LinkedIn about comparing NERC monitoring, protection relay control monitoring, to NERC SIP monitoring. And there's a big difference. And then I got references to the Bro, which is now Zeek, Security Onion, NSM Wiki, and the Quick Draw, Snort, and Circata rules that Digital Bond did. And they're continuing to add to, which is really great. Response resources, the Cuckoo's Egg, Cliff Stole. If you don't like reading, you can watch the YouTube video, a Nova special. Kevin Mandia, we've written a book, Incident Response and Computer Forensics, on 3rd edition. NIST has a document there. ICS CERT has Incident Response Plan for Control Systems. ICS CERT has the forensics white paper there as well. And I've got some talks about, my Black Hat talk about what's the difference we do in PLC digital forensics and incident response as well. And if you want to go to NIST or NERC, you can't because the government shut down. So if you need these references, come find us later. If we can put them on a Google, Wayback Machine or Google Drive, or I have it on my laptop. If you want the NIST standard, system is down. All right, this is the key takeaway. Know and harden your network. Look for free detection tools. Start small. Use free things. Use the people that you have. Give them power. Know and harden your endpoints. Don't forget about physical access too. And then know what to do when an incident occurs. Review your disaster recovery and incident response plans in practice.